The hostess at the ballroom doors looked past me to the officers behind me, smiled at no one in particular, and said, "You'll be more comfortable by the kitchen, ma'am." So I thanked her and I took the seat. What none of them knew, not the hostess, not the director working the donors near the bar, was that the gala they had built to forget me ran on money I answered for. Before the band packed its cases that night, every officer at the head table would be on their feet, not for the general at the podium, for the old woman in the plain navy dress they had just walked to the kitchen, but that came later. First, I had to sit down. My name is Lorraine Pruitt. I am 78 years old. I gave 41 of those years to the United States Army, most of them behind a desk that decided whether other people's plans were real or just wishful arithmetic. Comptroller. I balanced budgets that men with more medals than me called impossible, and I balanced them twice, because the second pass is where the lie usually hides. I can still run a column of figures faster than a screen can scroll them. That is not a brag. It is the one thing I have never been able to switch off. So when I lowered myself into that folding chair by the kitchen doors of the Callaway Hotel, with the good china clinking 40 feet away and the Chattahoochee going gold in the tall windows, I did the only thing I know how to do in a strange room. I counted. The Callaway sits right on Front Avenue, downtown Columbus, Georgia, with windows that hold the river the way a frame holds a painting. Walter loved those windows. 11 months in the ground, and I still turned to tell him things. The drive in from Caseta is 20 minutes, 22, if the light by the courthouse runs slow, and we made it together every spring for 9 years running. This year I made it alone. I had practiced not minding. I was not good at it yet. The head table stretched across the front of the ballroom under 3 chandeliers, dressed in crystal and white linen, and little brass card holders that threw the light back at you. My table was 4 folding chairs against the wall by the swinging kitchen doors, close enough that every time a server backed out with a tray, I felt the warm breath of the dishroom on my neck. Onions, bleach, coffee scorched down to tar. A boy in a white jacket bumped my chair on his second pass and stopped cold. "I'm so sorry, ma'am," he said. "It's tight back here. Don't you worry about me, son," I told him. "You've got more important people to spill on tonight." He almost smiled before he caught himself, and he went on. There was already a man at my table, older even than me, in a gray suit that had been good cloth a long while back, a small brass pin on the lapel I knew without reading it, the kind men earn in places they do not like to name. He had a cane hooked on the chair beside him. He nodded at me the way veterans nod. "A half-inch, no fuss. They put us out by the kitchen," he said. "They did. Best seats in the house, you ask me." He tipped his head toward the head table. "Up there you've got to make conversation with the mayor. Back here a man can eat his dinner in peace." He put out a dry hand. "Roy." "Lorraine," I said, and we left it there. 2 old soldiers nobody had bothered to seat, neither one telling the other a thing. I have always trusted men who do not lead with their resume. I unfolded my napkin, then folded it again into exact quarters and set it beside the plate, corners squared. My hands move like a straight edge. Old habit. While I did it, I read the room, because reading a room is just reading numbers that happen to be wearing gowns. The screen said the auction had crossed $94,000. I added the lots in my head while the boy in the white jacket swung past with the salads. It is not a hard trick once you have done it half a century. Top bid on every single lot, every one, generous to a fault. I got 61,000 and change, call it 62. $32,000 sat in the gap between what the screen claimed and what the paper could hold. Money does not show up in a gap like that by accident. Somebody put it there on purpose, the way you slide a card up a sleeve. I did not say a word. I am not built to make a scene, never have been. In 41 years, I learned that the loudest person in the room is almost never the one holding the pen. I don't make noise. I make it add up. So I folded that gap into the back of my mind, next to a few other things I had noticed since I walked in, and I left it there to keep. That is what I did with the folio, too. It rode on my lap the whole evening. A cracked leather folio, gone soft as a driving glove, the brass corners worn down to nothing. At the coat desk, a young man with a clipboard had reached for it, polite, professional, and I had told him, no thank you. Some things ride on your knee. He looked at me the way the young look at the old when they have decided we are confused. I let him. It cost me nothing, and it spared me explaining what I had no intention of explaining to anyone in that room. That your needlework in there? Roy asked, nodding at it, making kind conversation. Something like that, I said. While the salad plates came and went, I let my eyes walk the walls. There was a donor wall on the east side, backlit, the big givers spelled out in gold vinyl, a founder's circle across the top. Walter's name was not on it. Mine was not either. That stopped me for a breath, because I knew to the dollar what the two of us had given to that fund, and it was more than every name up there put together. But I had not driven in for my name on a wall. I told myself that twice and mostly believed it. Over the main doors, carved into a long oak beam the hotel had let the fund mount years back, were 3 words: carried, not counted. Gold leaf, serif letters, lit from below. The donors filed under it in their tuxedos and never once looked up. I looked up. I always look up at that beam. I stood in this room the morning a man on a lift fixed the last letter, and I was the only other soul here to see it. Carried, not counted. Walter used to say it about the men he served with, the ones you bring home. You do not tally a brother, you carry him. He said it to me the night he came back from his second tour, standing in our kitchen in Cusseta with his boots still on, the coffee going cold in his hand. I did not know then that he would one day write those words into the bones of a building. There was a great deal I did not know about what Walter had built. I was about to learn most of it in one evening in front of 300 people from a folding chair by the kitchen doors. There was one more thing I had clocked, and it would not let me be. The head table sat 11. I counted the chairs out of habit, the way I count stairs and exits and the cash in a collection plate. 10 of those places had name cards standing in their little brass holders. Board members, the mayor's wife, the keynote. The 11th had a card too, but it lay folded flat and face down on the plate, and the chair was pushed in tight, like nobody was meant to ask after it. An empty seat at a head table is a small thing, but a head table does not leave a gap by accident any more than an auction total does. Somebody had set that place, and then somebody had put it away. The program said the keynote that night was a 4-star general named Cobb. Retired now, a name even civilians half knew. A soldier they put up on a stage to make the checks come faster. I had never met the man. A long time back, I signed off on a logistics package that kept a brigade of his fed and fueled through a winter folks still do not like to discuss. But he would have no way of knowing that. Generals do not remember the comptroller. They remember the trucks arrived. And then there was the woman running the whole evening, gliding table to table in a midnight blue gown, touching elbows, laughing on the right beat, steering rich men toward the bidding sheets. The program named her too. Brittany Vance, Executive Director, Hearthstone Veterans Fund. She was the one who had smiled past me at the door. She was the one who had decided, in the half-second it takes to size a person up wrong, that I belonged by the kitchen. She came near our table once. Not for us. She came to flag down a server, and when her eyes swept across me, they paused, the way a broom pauses on something it might need to sweep. "You're all settled back here?" she said, already half turned away. "Are you with one of our guests this evening?" "I drove in from Casetta," I said. "How lovely." She was not listening. She was scanning the room over my head, looking for somebody who mattered. "The servers will see to you. Enjoy your night." And she was gone in a swirl of midnight blue before I finished thanking her. Roy watched her go and snorted softly into his water glass. "She runs a tight ship," he said. "She runs a fast one," I said. "Those aren't the same thing." I watched Brittany Vance work that ballroom for a while. The way you watch whether you have decided not to trust. She was good at it. Practiced. You do not get that smooth by accident. But every few minutes she would cut her eyes to the screen with the auction total, and when the number ticked up, something would settle in her face. Not surprise, relief. A woman watching a figure land exactly where she already knew it would. That bothered me more than the kitchen chair. A real surprise total makes people lean in and laugh. Brittany Vance was not surprised by hers. She was relieved by it, the way you are relieved when a story you have been telling holds together one more night. I did not have the shape of it yet. I had a $32,000 gap on a screen, an empty seat with a card turned face down, a donor wall with the wrong names on it and the right ones missing, and a feeling I have learned after half a century of being right about it, not to argue with. Something in the house Walter built was off its foundation, and I had been seated close enough to the kitchen to hear the whole thing settle. The plates came under silver covers, the server lifted with a little flourish that was wasted on a wall by the kitchen. Chicken in a sauce I could not have named, a spoon of rice, 3 spears of asparagus laid across the plate like they were standing at attention. I ate some of it. Food has not meant much to me since Walter went. 11 months, and I was still cooking for 2 out of habit and scraping the second plate into the bin while the kettle came up to a boil. Roy ate the way men of our generation eat, clean and unhurried, finishing what was put in front of him because somewhere a long time ago, a place taught him not to leave anything behind. "You don't say much," he said, not unkind. "Neither do you. My wife used to fill the quiet for the both of us." He set his fork down square on the plate. 46 years. She passed the spring before last. Some nights I still leave the porch light on for her. "I turn to tell mine things," I said. "Then I remember there's no one in the chair." He nodded, slow, and we let that sit between us, the way you let a heavy thing rest on the ground a minute before you pick it up again. He did not pat my hand. He did not tell me time heals. He understood that grief is just love that has nowhere left to go, and a man who understands that does not insult you with a speech. "Roy," I said, "what brings you out here tonight? A man who'd rather eat in peace." He touched the small brass pin on his lapel, the kind men earn in places they do not advertise. "Fella I served with started getting help from this outfit a few years back. Hearthstone. Got him off the street, got him to the VA, got him sitting upright at his own kitchen table again." He looked toward the head table with its crystal and its chandeliers. "I came to see where the money goes. Figured I'd shake the hand of whoever built a thing like that." "Did you find him?" "No," Roy said. "They tell me the man who started it passed last year. Never got his name." I picked up my water glass so my hands would have something to do, and I drank. And I did not tell Roy that I had been married to the man who started it for 51 years, or that I had driven in alone from Casetta to see where the money went to. I was not ready to say it out loud in a room that had decided I was nobody. Some things you carry on your knee a while longer before you set them on the table. While the band tuned and the servers cleared, I did the work I cannot help doing. I ran the numbers. I knew what the Hearthstone endowment was supposed to throw off in a year. I knew it the way you know your own birthday, because Walter and I had built the thing dollar by dollar, and because the principle that fed it answered to a column of figures I had balanced myself. An endowment that size, invested plain and sober the way Walter liked things, puts out a steady amount every year for the grants and the scholarships and the rent checks that get men like Roy's friend off the street. I knew that number cold. I had signed my name under it more times than I could count. So when the screen flashed its little montage of good works, so many families served, so many beds funded, so many veterans housed, I added it up against what the endowment should have spent, and the two columns would not lie down together. The good works on the screen came to less than half of what the money should have done. Far less. There was a whole year of giving missing from the picture they were so proud to show. Not padded this time. Gone. A padded auction is vanity. You round up so the room feels generous and the next bid comes faster. I have seen it at every gala I ever sat through, and I never lost a wink over it. But money that is collected and counted and then does not arrive where it was sent, that is not vanity. That is a door left open in a house and a draft coming through it, and somebody upstairs pretending they don't feel the cold. I folded my napkin into exact quarters again, corners squared, and I set it down. And I kept my face the way I have kept it through 41 years of men telling me my arithmetic was wrong right up until it wasn't. I don't make noise, I make it add up. And what I was adding up by the kitchen doors of the Callaway Hotel, with the Chattahoochee gone dark in the windows now and the city lights laid out on the water, did not add up at all. The lights came down. A board member I did not know took the podium and welcomed the room and thanked the sponsors. And a slide came up behind him with logos on it, and one of those logos was an event firm, Vance and Associates, listed as the evening's production partner. The same Brittany Vance gliding the floor in midnight blue was being paid by the fund to run the party that raised the money for the fund. I filed that too. A woman who sits on both sides of a table can be honest, but somebody ought to be counting her hands. Then the board member said the name everyone had come for. It is my profound honor to introduce tonight's keynote, a soldier who needs no introduction in this town, retired General William Cobb. The room stood and clapped, and I stood too, because you stand for the flag, and you stand for the anthem, and you stand for a 4-star general, even one you have never met, even from a folding chair by the kitchen. Cobb crossed to the podium, white-haired now, broader than his photographs, moving with the careful dignity of a man whose knees have carried more than their share. He had a way of pausing before he spoke that filled the room without a word in it. I had never laid eyes on the man. A long time back, in a winter people still do not like to discuss, I signed off on the logistics package that kept a brigade of his fed and warm and moving when every road that mattered had turned to ice, and the experts swore it could not be supplied. He would not know that. Generals remember that the trucks arrived. They do not remember the woman who made the trucks add up. He spoke for 15 minutes about brotherhood, about the ones you bring home and the ones you don't, about the long, quiet war that waits for a soldier after the loud one is over. He was good. He meant it. And near the end, he looked up at the long oak beam over the main doors, at the 3 words carved into it and lit from below, and he read them out to the room. "Carried, not counted," General Cobb said. "I'm told the man who founded this fund had those words put up there. I never met him, but I know what they mean. You don't tally a brother, you carry him." My eyes stung, and I let them, in the dark, where nobody by the kitchen was looking. Walter said those words to me in our kitchen in Cusseta, with his boots still on, and the coffee going cold in his hand, the night he came home from his second tour. I had carried them 30 years without knowing he would one day cut them into oak. The whole room heard a stranger read my husband's heart out loud and clapped politely and reached for their wine. I was the only soul in that ballroom who knew whose voice those words were really in. When the lights came up for the dessert and the live auction, my knee had stiffened the way it does when I sit too long, and I needed to move it before it locked. I told Roy I'd be back, and I took my folio with me, because some things ride with you, and I went looking for the quiet hallway that every hotel keeps behind the ballrooms for the staff and the stacked chairs and the people who need a minute away from the noise. I found it past the swinging doors, a service corridor that smelled of coffee urns and floor wax, lit low, lined with rolling carts and folded round tables leaned against the wall. I stood there a moment working the knee, grateful for the cool and the dim, the band gone muffled behind the wall. And around the corner, near the loading dock where the air came in cold off Front Avenue, I heard a voice I had already learned not to trust. Brittany Vance, on the phone, low and fast and nothing like the silk she used on the floor. I know what date it lands. 2 weeks. I can read a calendar. A pause. Because the state doesn't send a charities examiner to admire the centerpieces, that's why. They pull the disbursement file. Every authorization, every signature. Another pause, and her voice dropped lower, tighter, the relief I had seen on her face all night curdling into something else. It's covered. The transfers are authorized. They're signed off by the trustee. It's all in the file. It's clean on paper. A long silence while whoever was on the other end said something she did not like. Don't say that name to me on the phone. The Pruitt signature is on every page. As far as that audit is concerned, Lorraine Pruitt authorized every dollar that moved, and Lorraine Pruitt is a name on a deed and nothing else. Nobody's heard from her in a year. She's not going to walk through the door. I stood very still in that corridor with my folio against my chest and the cold coming off the dock, and I felt the floor of the whole evening drop out from under me and land somewhere I could finally see it. It was not a snub. The kitchen chair was not an insult, and the missing name on the wall was not an oversight. It was housekeeping. You do not seat a woman by the kitchen because you think little of her. You seat her there because you need her to stay a ghost. Brittany Vance had been moving Hearthstone's money out the back door to plug a hole in her own sinking firm, and she had done it by writing my name, Lorraine Pruitt, on the line that made it legal, betting her whole life that the old woman the name belonged to was too far away and too forgotten and too grief-worn to ever appear in this room and read it. And here I was, 20 minutes south from Cusseta, standing in the service hall, holding in my two hands the one document in the state of Georgia that said exactly who Lorraine Pruitt was and exactly what only her signature, her real one, was allowed to do. I did not gasp. I did not let the folio so much as creak. I waited until her heels clicked back toward the ballroom and the fire door to the dock thumped shut, and then I let out one long breath into the cold, the way you do when a column you have been staring at for an hour finally shows you the place where the lie is hiding. Then I went and found a folded round table leaned against the wall, and I set my folio down flat on it under the one bare bulb, and I opened the brass clasp for the first time since I left the house that evening. The leather gave the way old leather gives, soft as a glove. Inside, against the worn lining, was the deed Walter had left me, the founding trust of the Hearthstone Veterans Fund, and clipped behind it the pages his estate attorney had sent me to read, and I had not yet had the heart to. I turned to the disbursement record. I ran my finger down the dates, and I started, very quietly, by the light of one bulb in a hallway that smelled of wax and cold coffee, to make it add up. The disbursement schedule ran in two neat columns, the way Walter kept everything in this life, plain on the left and sober on the right. And I went down it with the side of my thumb, the way I have gone down 10,000 ledgers, not reading the numbers so much as letting them read me. The principal was where it belonged. The earnings were where they belonged. It was the line below that, the line marked outgoing, that had been taught to lie. There were the grants I knew, the rent checks and the bus passes and the small, dignified sums that put a roof over a man like Roy's friend. Those were real. I had blessed every one of them across a kitchen table in Caseta, with Walter reading the names aloud. But threaded in among them, quarter by quarter, were transfers I had never seen in my life. Management fee, production retainer, event services, advanced. Each one routed to the same payee, and the payee was Vance and Associates, and each one larger than the last, the way a leak in a hull is larger than the last time you looked because the sea does not get tired. I followed them back to where they started, and they started 11 months ago, the month Walter died. Up to that month, the outgoing column was his hand and mine. After that month, it was one hand only, and that hand had signed a name across the authorizing line in a careful, looping script, and the name it signed was mine. I held the page up under the bare bulb, and I looked at my own signature, telling a lie I never told. It was good work. I will give the woman that. The L was close. The slant was close. Whoever practiced it had practiced from something real, a check maybe, an old card. But a signature is not the only thing your hand learns, and there is a thing my hand has done since the winter of 1971, when a quartermaster sergeant in a freezing supply tent stood over me and said a 7 that can be read as a 1 will get a man killed at the end of a long supply line, Lieutenant. So you will put a bar through every 7 you write for the rest of your natural life. I have barred my 7s for 55 years. I bar them on grocery lists. I would bar them in my sleep. The dates on those forged authorizations marched down the page in a tidy hand, and not one 7 among them wore a bar. I closed the folio softly, the brass clasp going home with a sound no louder than a watch being shut. And I stood in that service hall a long moment with the wax and the cold coffee and the band thudding muffled through the wall, and I did the only kind of grieving I have ever been any good at. I made it add up. Brittany Vance had a firm taking on water, and she had reached into the one purse in Columbus nobody was watching, the purse of the dead, and she had used a widow's name to bail herself dry, because a widow is the safest signature in the world. A widow does not check her mail. A widow does not drive in. A widow sits where she is put. I opened the deed itself then, the founding charter, the heavy cream page Walter had paid a careful man to draw up so it would outlive the both of us. I had not let myself read it since the funeral. At the top, under the seal, in the dry language of trusts, it named the fund and its purpose, and 3 lines down, it carried a dedication I had never been told was there. Established by Walter James Pruitt, it said, in honor of Lorraine Pruitt, who taught me what carried means. They had seated me by the kitchen of a house that was built in my name. They had left my chair empty at the head table and turned my card face down, and out front, over the doors, lit up gold for 400 people to admire, were the words I said to my husband in our own kitchen, with his boots still on. Walter had not stolen them. He had enshrined them. And then a stranger had read them off the beam to a clapping room, and another stranger had signed my hand to a theft. And between the two of them, I had been turned into furniture in my own life. I have been angry maybe 4 times that I would call real anger, the kind that goes cold instead of hot. This was the 4th. It did not shake my hands. It steadied them. I took out my phone and I called Pace. He answered on the second ring, which is the only acceptable number of rings for a man who sends a widow pages to read and does not call to see if she has. "Mrs. Pruitt," he said, "it's late for you to be ringing. Is everything all right? Are you in town, Mr. Pace?" "I'm at home, off Winton Road." "Why? What's happened? How fast can you be at the Callaway on Front Avenue with the certified original of Walter's Trust and your bar card?" There was a small silence, the silence of a careful man setting down whatever was in his hand. "What's at the Callaway?" "The Hearthstone Gala," I said. "And every dollar Walter set aside to keep men off the street walking out the loading dock in my name. The audit lands in 2 weeks. I would like to be there before it, not after." "Don't say another word into that phone," Pace said, and I heard a chair scrape and a closet open. 15 minutes. Don't sign anything. Don't accuse anyone. Don't let anybody take that folio out of your hands. "Lorraine, do you hear me? Your hands only. My hands only," I said. I haven't let it off my lap all night. I put the phone away and I straightened my jacket and I went back toward the noise. And I will tell you what I was wearing, because it is the part nobody in that ballroom had bothered to look at all evening. I had on my good navy, and pinned in a single quiet row above my heart were the miniatures, the small versions you wear when the dress blues stay in the closet. 4 decades of a life, pinned down to a strip you could cover with 2 fingers. The girl who took coats had glanced at them and seen costume jewelry. Brittany Vance had swept her broom of a gaze across them and seen an old woman who wandered in. Not one soul under those chandeliers had stood close enough or cared enough to read what a body had paid to wear them. That is the thing about being decided not to matter. People stop reading you. They think they already have. The live auction was running hot when I came back in. A man in a loud tie was working the room over a week in somebody's lake house, and the paddles were going up, and the screen at the front threw its big, confident numbers across the dark. Roy half rose when he saw me, the way men our age still do, and I put my hand on his shoulder to sit him back down. "You look like a different woman than the one who left," he said, low. "Same woman," I said. "I just found the bottom of something. Brittany Vance found me before I reached my chair. She came across the floor in that midnight blue with a smile fixed on like a brooch. And there was an edge under it now, because a tidy woman does not like loose pieces, and I had become a loose piece, wandering her service hall when I ought to have been parked. "Ma'am," she said, warm as a closed window. "We're into the program portion now, and the back area really is just for staff. Why don't I have someone walk you out to the lobby where it's more comfortable? Your evening's been such a long one." She put her hand toward my elbow, the gentle steer you use on the confused and the old, the steer that says nothing and means leave. "I'm comfortable," I said. "I really must insist." The smile did not move, but the eyes did, flicking once to the folio under my arm, and then away, the way a thief's eyes go to the door. "We have a lot of important guests tonight, and I'd hate for you to feel out of place." "I won't feel out of place," I said. "I've been to this gala before." Something passed over her then, fast, gone before it set. She did not know me. But some animal under the polish had begun to suspect that the furniture was looking back. She got a grip on her face and a grip on my elbow, and she began, very graciously, very firmly, to walk me toward the kitchen doors, narrating it for the nearby tables as she went, just getting our guest settled, and the loud Thai man called another number, and the paddles went up, and that is the picture. That is exactly the picture the whole back half of that room would have carried home if the evening had been allowed to end the way she had drawn it up. An old woman in navy being walked out by the kitchen while the rich clapped for a lake house. It was right then that General William Cobb came down off the dais. He had been at the head table through the auction, and now he rose, white head above the crystal, and he came down the two carpeted steps with a hand on the rail for his knees, and he started across the floor toward the side doors, toward the night, an old soldier slipping out before the crush, the way old soldiers do. His path and Brittany Vance's path and mine all ran toward the same corner of that room, the corner by the kitchen, and we arrived at it together, her hand on my elbow steering me off, and the general crossing 3 feet in front of us with his eyes on the exit. And his eyes did not make the exit. They snagged on the row above my heart. I watched it happen. I have watched men read ribbons my whole life, and there is a particular way a real soldier does it. Fast, top to bottom. The way you read a sentence you already half know, and his eyes did that. And then they stopped. They stopped on one. They went back up and read the row again, slower, the auction and the lake house and the band all running on behind him. And then General William Cobb, 4 stars, keynote, the man the whole room had stood for an hour ago, looked up from the medals into my face the way you look at a thing you were told was lost. "Ma'am," he said, and his voice had gone careful, "where did you serve?" Brittany Vance's hand was still on my elbow. "General, I'm so sorry, she's just a guest. Let me get her out of your way." He did not seem to hear her. He was waiting on me. "All over, General," I said. "But the winter I expect you're thinking of, I was at a desk. I made the trucks add up. I saw the yearland in his face. I saw a road that turned to ice and a brigade that should have starved and did not. And I saw him understand, 50 years late, that the trucks do not add themselves. He took one step back from me, and he set his heels together, an old man's heels in patent shoes on a hotel carpet, and General William Cobb brought his hand up slow and level and held it there at the brim of a cap he was not wearing, and he held it, and he did not drop it. He saluted me by the kitchen doors. Brittany Vance's hand came off my elbow like the elbow had gone hot. And behind the general, at the long head table under the chandeliers, a younger officer saw his general holding a salute and was on his feet before he could have known why, and the woman beside him stood, and the man beside her, and it went down that table like a window thrown open in every room of a house at once, chairs sliding back, crystal trembling, a whole row of dress uniforms and good suits coming up out of their seats to face the corner by the kitchen, where the old woman in navy stood with a cracked leather folio held against her heart. The loud tie man stopped talking. The band lost the thread and quit. 400 faces turned to find what the head table had risen for, and they found me, and they found the general's unbroken salute, and the only sound left in the riverfront ballroom of the Callaway Hotel was the river you could not hear, and the blood you could. I did not salute him back. You do not, out of uniform, and besides, my hands were full. I held what I held, and I let the old soldier finish what he had started, and I said, quiet enough that it was almost only for him, "At ease, General. You'll hurt that arm." He brought the hand down. His eyes were wet, and he was not ashamed of it. And into that hung and ringing silence the side doors opened, and a lean gray man in a hurried coat came in off Front Avenue with a slim case under his arm, and the cold still on him, and he stopped just inside, taking in the standing room and the held breath, and his eyes found me across all of it. Pace had arrived. He did not hurry the last of the distance. A careful man reads a room before he steps into it, and the estate's attorney, a lean gray fellow named Pace, stood just inside the side doors off Front Avenue and read this one. The standing uniforms, the general with his arm just lowered and his eyes shining, the hostess with her hand stalled halfway back to her side, and the old woman in navy at the center of it, holding a cracked leather folio to her chest. Then he came on across the parquet at the level walk of a man who carries the only paper in the building that signifies and knows the weight of it. Brittany Vance found her feet first. I will not pretend she was not good in a room. She turned from me to the 400 and lifted both palms the way you settle a startled horse, and her voice came out warm and certain over the dropped band. What a moment, everyone. What a beautiful, spontaneous moment. Will you join me in thanking General Cobb and every man and woman in this hall who ever wore the uniform? And she began to clap, and out in the dark a few uncertain hands took it up, because a crowd will believe whatever a confident woman tells it just saw. And she was telling them quickly, a sweet old thing, a nice salute. Nothing to take home but a warm chest and an open checkbook. It would have held. I have watched capable people smooth over worse with less. Her hand was already drifting back toward my elbow under the cover of the applause, the practiced nudge resuming, and in another half-minute, I would have been the dear story they told going home over the 13th Street Bridge, and that quiet drain in the books would have gone right on bleeding into a firm not one soul at these white tables had ever heard named. Then Pace reached the head table, and he laid his slim case flat on the cloth among the low candles, and he worked the latches, and when he spoke, he did not lift his voice the least bit. He owns the sort of voice a room has to quiet itself to catch, which has always carried farther than shouting. "Forgive me," he said to the long table of dress blues and good dark suits. "My name is Pace. I'm the attorney for the estate of Walter James Pruitt and counsel of record to the Hearthstone Veterans Fund, your fund. Since the board is seated right here in front of me, I'd ask 1 minute to read a single sentence of the document that made all of this." He set his hand on the folio I passed him, the only time it left my hands all night, and the clasp gave under his thumb. The founding trust, the certified original. Brittany Vance's smile did not crack so much as set, the way pond ice sets, still bright on top and going hard underneath. "We are so far behind on the program," she said, light, to the table and not to him. "Perhaps after the auction, in private, we could—" "It's one sentence," Pace said, mild as milk, and an old man at the center of the head table, a board chairman with a face like a closed bank, said, without looking up from his folded hands, "Read it." So Pace read it. He read it slow, the way you read a thing you want a room to be unable to claim later it misheard. "The surviving trustee, Lorraine Pruitt, shall hold sole and exclusive authority over all disbursements from the endowment, its principal and its earnings, for so long as she shall live." He set the page down, face up, where the candlelight could reach it. "Sole," he said. "Exclusive. There is one living trustee of this fund. She is standing by your kitchen. I have seen a number of faces meet a number of figures they could not make balance. Brittany Vance's was the stillest of them. The blood went out of it in a single smooth sheet, the practiced warmth draining off all at once and leaving only the architecture. And I watched her run the arithmetic I had run 2 hours before her under a bare bulb. If the only hand that could move $1 out of that endowment was mine, then every dollar she had moved for 11 months had walked out under a signature that was never hers to spend. The forms, the management fees, the production retainers. Each one a small clean theft authorized in a name she had taught a pen to forge. I stepped up beside Pace then, because some things a widow ought to set down with her own hand, and I took from the folio the page I had found by that one bulb, the authorization sheet with my name looping along the bottom in a stranger's careful copy. I laid it on the white cloth beside the clause, the two of them touching, the true and the counterfeit, close enough that the chairman leaned in over both. "That is not my signature," I said, and I kept my voice level and low, a comptroller reading a finding, not a woman pressing a charge. It is a good likeness. Whoever made it studied. But I learned to write in a supply tent 55 winters ago, under a sergeant who promised me a sloppy figure would starve a man at the far end of a long road. And there are marks my hand makes now that I could not stop making if I tried. I set my finger under the dates that march down the forged sheet, quarter after quarter, every one of them after the month I buried Walter. Look at the sevens, I said. Mine wear a bar across the middle. Every one I have written since 1971. There is not a barred seven anywhere on this page. Whoever signed my name has never once stood where I stood. The chairman looked at the sevens. He looked at them a long while. Then he looked up, past me to the woman in the dark blue dress, and his face did something slow and final, the way a vault door is slow and final. I will give Brittany Vance this much, and then I will be done giving her anything. She did not argue. A lesser kind of trouble argues. She stood very straight in that beautiful dress with the whole standing room turned to her now, and the band silent, and the river running unheard behind the tall, dark glass, and whatever ledger she kept inside herself, she read the bottom line of it and accepted the figure. She set her little clipboard down on the corner of the head table, squared to the edge, the habit of a tidy woman to the last. She did not look at me. She turned, and she walked the length of the floor, and she went out through the swinging doors by the kitchen, the same doors she had meant to walk me through, and they sighed shut behind her on the heat and clang of the kitchen beyond. And that is the last anyone in that ballroom saw of her that night. No hand was laid on her. None needed to be. The board did not wait for morning or for the room to settle. The chairman rose, and he did not make a speech. He gave orders the way men who have run boards give them. He told the gentleman 2 seats down, a lawyer for the fund, to telephone the State Charities Bureau in Atlanta that night and ask for a hold on every account the fund held. And the man was already standing with his phone in his hand. He told the table that the contract with the firm of Vance and Associates was suspended as of that minute, and that the audit would not be waiting its 2 weeks. He asked Pace, would he stay and walk the examiners through the trust in the morning, and Pace said he would. He had cleared the day for exactly that. Over by the service doors, a younger officer from the head table had gone and set himself, hands folded, not as a threat to anyone, only so that nothing further would walk out of that room tonight that the living trustee had not blessed. And a thing happened at the edge of the floor that I would have missed if I had let myself be busy being proud. A steward, a boy of maybe 20 in a white jacket, went without being told to the row of folding chairs against the wall by the kitchen, my chair among them, the chairs they set out every year for whoever did not signify enough for linen, and he began to fold them down and carry them off, 2 under each arm, out the service door, and he did not bring them back. The corner where they had put me stood bare. I do not know who told him to. Maybe no one did. Maybe a young man simply looked at that corner and at me and understood faster than his elders had in 10 years that there are people you do not seat by the door, and decided on his own that there would be one fewer place in this hall for setting a person down where they could be forgotten. Roy found me in the middle of it. The old fellow they had sat beside me by the kitchen, and he had his handkerchief out and was not bothering to hide that he had needed it. "Lorraine," he said, "all these years, you never said a word about any of this." "There wasn't a word to say," I told him. "Walter built it. I only signed where he pointed. I never once thought I would have to stand up in a room and prove I was the one holding it." General William Cobb had not gone out into the night after all. He had come down the floor and was waiting a respectful step off, his white head bowed a little, the way a soldier waits to be acknowledged. When I turned to him, he put out his old hand. Not in salute now, only a hand, and I took it. "Colonel?" he said, and that was the first time the word had been spoken aloud in that hall. The eagles I had worn for the last 9 of my 41 years, the rank not one person at the door had thought to wonder about. We ate that winter because of you, the whole brigade. I spent 50 years not knowing whose name to thank, and they had you sitting by the dishes. His voice thickened, and he let it. I am ashamed of the seating, ma'am. I had no hand in it, and I am ashamed of it anyway. You stood up, I said. You were first on your feet. That squares it, General. They wanted me at the head table then. The chairman himself came round to walk me up, his arm offered, the whole room watching the old woman be escorted to the front at last. And I understood that this too was a kind of seating, a better cushion in a better spot, and that I could spend the rest of the night being honored in the chair they had finally judged me grand enough to fill. I had sat in their poor chair, and now they offered me their fine one, and I had learned in one evening that the chair was never the thing. For 11 months I had braced a house that looked straight through me, and I was done lending my shoulder to a wall that would not so much as turn its head. So I did not take the chairman's arm. I walked up to the head table on my own, past the offered elbow, to the one place that had stood empty and unexplained under the chandeliers the whole night long, the seat with the small white card folded face down that no one would say a word about. I turned the card over, printed on it, in the same gold as the 3 words that ran the length of the wall behind the dais and over every door of that building, the words I had once said to Walter across our own table with his boots still wet, carried, not counted, the card read. And under it, Colonel Lorraine Pruitt, founding trustee. They had set my place at the head of the room a year ago, and then folded my name away and steered me to the dishes. And the only man in Columbus who could have told them better was lying 11 months under the Georgia clay, and he had been telling them all along, in gold, over their heads, where not one of them ever thought to look. I did not take the head table because they finally offered it. I just stopped bracing a house that would not see me and stopped sitting where I was put. I carried the folio across the floor and set it on the cloth beneath those 3 gold words. Then I drew out the founder's chair and sat down.